bully me for a whole year? I trained, waited, and then put him in a headlock. Hey Reddit, first time poster here, so please bear with me. English isn't my first language, so if there are mistakes, I apologize in advance. Let's get into it. This all happened about a year ago, back when I was in 7th grade, and honestly, it still feels surreal to think about. Back then, middle school was hell for me. I wasn't the smartest kid in the room, I wasn't athletic, and I definitely wasn't popular. I was just another awkward kid trying to survive the social jungle that is middle school, but somehow, I ended up with a massive target on my back. CR, a boy who thrived on tormenting others, decided I was his favorite victim. CR wasn't just a bully. He was the bully. Everyone knew him. He was the kid who always had a group of followers laughing at his cruel jokes and encouraging his awful behavior. For a full year, he made my life miserable. CR didn't just tease me, he outright humiliated me. He'd shove me into lockers so hard the clang would echo down the hallway. He'd walk by and punch me in the arm, calling me fatso or loser in a tone loud enough to make sure everyone heard. It didn't stop there. CR seemed to have a talent for finding new ways to make me feel small. He'd pull chairs out from under me in the cafeteria, spread rumors, and make me the punchline of his jokes. The worst part was the crowd. People laughed when he did these things. It wasn't just the physical pain that got to me, it was the humiliation, the feeling of being completely alone. A few kids would sometimes murmur something like, "That's not cool," but no one ever stood up for me. And honestly, why would they? CR was intimidating. He wasn't just mean, he was confident, strong, and smart enough to know how to get away with it. Teachers never seemed to notice, and if they did, they'd brush it off as kids being kids. Feeling powerless, at the time, I was just stuck. I didn't know what to do. I'd been doing Taekwondo for a couple of years, and I'd even earned a red belt. You'd think that would make me feel strong, right? But it didn't. I was overweight, slow, and honestly, terrified of confrontation. The moves I practiced in class felt useless in the real world. What good was a spinning kick when CR could knock me down with a single punch? I felt like a fraud wearing that red belt. There were days I tried to stand up for myself, but it always backfired. CR would laugh in my face, hit me harder, and somehow make me feel even smaller. I started dreading school. Every morning, I'd wake up with this pit in my stomach, wondering what fresh hell CR had in store for me that day. I felt powerless, and worse, I started to believe that maybe I deserved it. Maybe I really was just the weak, pathetic loser CR said I was. The moment everything changed, one day, CR took things a step further. During class, he threw an eraser at my head. It hit me squarely, and the whole class erupted into laughter. I'll never forget the way he smirked at me, sitting there with his feet kicked up on the desk like he was untouchable. Something inside me snapped. That night, I stared at myself in the mirror for a long time. I didn't like what I saw. I looked at my reflection, at the tears in my eyes, the slouched shoulders, the defeated expression, and I hated it. I hated how weak and powerless I looked. For the first time, I thought, why am I letting this happen? That night, I made a promise to myself, CR was not going to win anymore. The training begins. From that moment on, I poured every ounce of energy I had into changing myself. I started going to Taekwondo classes more often, staying for 2-hour sessions instead of just one. I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. Every punch, every kick, every drill, I treated it like a fight with CR. I imagined his face every time I hit the punching bag, every time I practiced a throw. But I didn't stop at Taekwondo. I started working out at home, too. Push-ups, sit-ups, running laps around my block. I was determined to get stronger. The first few weeks were brutal. I'd come home sore, drenched in sweat, and barely able to move. But I kept going. Slowly, I started to see results. Within 3 months, I'd lost a significant amount of weight. My punches were faster, my kicks more precise, and for the first time in a long time, I felt strong. Oh, and I'd also grown a couple of inches taller, which didn't hurt. The plan. I knew I couldn't just let CR keep tormenting me. I needed to show him that I wasn't the same person he'd been bullying all year. But I didn't want to act recklessly. I wanted to make sure my moment of revenge was perfect, something he'd never forget. For weeks, I watched him. I studied his habits, learned his routines, and waited for the perfect opportunity. I noticed he had this habit of hanging out by the lockers in the mornings, surrounded by his usual group of followers. He'd stand there, laughing loudly, throwing paper at people, and being the center of attention. That was his stage. I wanted to bring him down from it. The morning of reckoning. It was a cold, foggy morning in Los Angeles. I walked into school that day with my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me as I walked down the hallway. There he was, standing by the lockers, surrounded by his group. He was laughing, throwing a crumpled paper ball at some poor kid, completely unaware of what was about to happen. I waited until he stepped away from his group, heading to his next target. That's when I struck. I walked up behind him, grabbed him around the neck, and locked my arm tightly under his chin. It wasn't just a casual hold, it was a full-on Taekwondo headlock, one I'd practiced hundreds of times. CR froze for a moment, completely caught off guard. Then, as he realized what was happening, he started thrashing and screaming. He swung his fists wildly, hitting my back and side, but I didn't let go. I held on tight, pulling him down to the ground. His face turned red, and his eyes widened in fear. For the first time, he looked vulnerable. After what felt like an eternity, probably 5 minutes at most, I finally let him go. CR scrambled to his feet, his face a mixture of rage and humiliation. And then, to my shock, he started crying. Crying. CR, the school's biggest bully, ran away sobbing. The aftermath. Of course, it didn't end there. CR went straight to the principal's office and told them I'd attacked him for no reason. He claimed I'd punched him, cursed him out, and been completely out of control. None of that was true, but I still got called to the office to explain myself. I walked into that office feeling nervous but determined. CR was sitting there with the principal, P, and vice principal, VP, looking smug. He thought he had me beat. But I wasn't about to back down. I told my side of the story, every single detail. I told them about the bullying, the insults, the punches, the humiliation. I even named specific incidents, dates, and witnesses. By the time I was done, the room was silent. P and VP looked shocked, and CR couldn't even look me in the eye. In the end, CR got suspended for 2 weeks. The fallout. CR never bothered me again after that day. He avoided me like the plague, and honestly, that was victory enough for me. Looking back, that moment wasn't just about taking down a bully. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't helpless. I could fight back, take control, and stand tall. So, Reddit, was I too extreme, or did CR get what he deserved? Let me know your thoughts. Life after the showdown. After CR got suspended, the air at school felt different. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't holding my breath every time I turned a corner or walked down the hallway. The whispers started almost immediately. Did you hear what happened to CR? He got taken down by that kid? No way. About time someone stood up to him. Word spread like wildfire. I could feel people staring at me in the hallways, but for once, it wasn't with pity or amusement. It was respect. I'd gone from being the kid everyone ignored to the one they couldn't stop talking about. Even CR's crew, the same kids who used to laugh at his jokes and egg him on, started keeping their distance from him. It was like a switch had flipped. Without his usual swagger, CR wasn't intimidating anymore. He was just a guy. A guy who had been put in his place. Confronting the new normal, despite all this, I kept my head down. I wasn't looking to become some kind of school legend. I just wanted peace. But it wasn't that simple. One day, about a week after CR's suspension ended, I saw him in the hallway. My stomach tightened instinctively, even though I knew he wouldn't try anything. He looked different, smaller, somehow. His usual cocky smirk was gone, replaced with a kind of nervous energy. He avoided eye contact and walked right past me without saying a word. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. Did I go too far? I shook the thought away almost immediately. This wasn't just about me. It was about everyone he'd bullied, everyone he'd humiliated. I wasn't the first person he'd hurt, and I probably wouldn't be the last. But at least now, he knew there were consequences. Unexpected reactions. What surprised me the most were the reactions from my classmates. A few kids who'd stayed silent before started coming up to me, saying things like, "That was awesome," or "You're braver than I could ever be." Even kids I barely knew started smiling at me in the hallways, like we shared some unspoken bond. But not everyone was on my side. A handful of kids muttered about how I'd overreacted or stooped to his level. One girl even said, "Violence doesn't solve anything," which made me roll my eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. It was easy for them to judge. They hadn't lived through what I had. A conversation I didn't expect. One day, about a month after the incident, something surprising happened. CR came up to me. It was during lunch, and I was sitting alone, as usual. He walked up, tray in hand, and stood there awkwardly for a moment before saying, "Can I sit here?" I was so shocked I couldn't speak. I just nodded. For a while, we ate in silence. Then he said, "Look, I'm sorry." I froze. This was the last thing I expected. To hear from him. For what? I asked cautiously. For everything, he mumbled, staring at his tray. "I don't know why I did all that stuff to you. I guess. I don't know. I was just a jerk." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to yell at him, to make him feel the way he'd made me feel. But another part of me, the part that had spent months hating myself, understood. "It wasn't okay," I said finally. "What you did, it wasn't okay." "I know," he said quietly. I wanted to say sorry." And then he walked away. Moving forward, after that, things changed even more. CR stopped hanging out with his old crew, and while we didn't exactly become friends, there was a kind of unspoken truce between us. He stopped bullying other kids, too, or at least, I didn't see it happening anymore. As for me, I kept training. Not because I thought I'd need it again, but because it made me feel strong and confident in a way I never had before. Taekwondo wasn't just a sport anymore, it was a reminder of what I was capable of when I refused to give up. Looking back, I don't regret what I did. CR needed to learn a lesson, and I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't helpless. That moment changed both of us in different ways. Final thoughts. So, what do you think, Reddit? Did I handle it the right way, or was I too extreme? Have you ever had a moment where you stood up for yourself and everything changed? I'd love to hear your stories. And to anyone out there dealing with a bully, you're stronger than you think. Don't let anyone make you feel like you don't matter. You do.